Shanu Valniks of Americans love this car. But if it's a door, then buy a Dodge Caliber in the first place, which for a car that is positioned like a crossover, cheap wines. And what about the new one? Dodge Caliber prompts on a budget platform for the American market, but in a format attached to other countries. The model was poked in Australia, in China, in Europe. For its class, Caliber is as simple as possible, but it has its advantages: maintainability and cost-effectiveness in operation. The model is based on the Chrysler PM/MK platform, a variation of the Mitsubishi G's, based on Lancer, ASX and the Outlander XL. Truthfully, with an American accent, the wiring here is different. That rear suspension can be serious about Japanese models. In another case, a typical platform with a large Susili steel body, there is no aluminum in the design. McPherson suspensions typical for the class in front and a rich rear. The basic front drive, optional new implementations behind the additional hood reducer and electromagnetic clutch on the rear axle. Motors, Choterisal cylinders of the Chrysler World Engine Series are distributed to the Gamma Alliance, atmospheric volume 1.8, 2.0 and 2.4 liters and supercharging 2.4 for the SRT4 version. Daimler Chrysler, as the owner of the Dodge brand, took part in the development of these engines, introduced the 4B1 series from Mitsubishi and Theta 2 from Hyundai. The engines are mentally interchangeable, but not identical. It is required to be safe that the cylinder blocks are not rich, but they can be drilled into the Japanese and Korean ones, without seeming already about the piston group. In addition to the possession, the configuration of the living system and the gaskets. Gearboxes are represented by 5 and 6-speed manual options, an alternative to Jatco CVT. The Variator was only equipped with petrol engines 2.0 and 2.4 liters naturally aspirated, and the supercharged one was equipped with an on-the-fly 6-speed manual gearbox from Getrag, formerly, the American and galvanized, Pofarbovania Metal Yak Snow, Navit Blisk Pokrytia Zbrigadovgo. Only the varnish can sometimes get off the bumpers, and you can't get your finger between the body panels. It is objectively far from the minimum gaps and Farby that are familiar to Europeans, which can be easily applied to plastic. However, the best thing is that the body is corroded, after galvanizing and using Suvoro American materials for Licofarb coating and American steel. The sills and arches are rotting, and all the sticks of the panels are krill and bumpers. The edge of the Daewoo is not very visible at the speed of corrosion. There are chips in the paintwork, the lower parts and the edges of the doors. The bottom of the body is trimmed badly, but the surface corrosion may be present on all elements. There are places near the seams and other brackets to get rusty, like in all the numerical studs. The rudium is poured in the arches and wound on the seams, the whole thread for caliber. The fringe at the bottom of the inner part of the arch is the axis of the right non-acceptance. And the bracket for fastening the sensor of the control system to the vise and the tires at the front artsy simply rots and it bovtites you on the wire. Shukkati Dodge Caliber without corrosion from the bottom is absolutely marvelous. For a shorter one, you will have a copy. For someone with a metal, you can see more clearly. You can clean up the problematic areas for the sake of it, without going into the brewing. Otherwise you just build a spread of rock, updating the anti-corrosive. The glasses of the front suspension rot along the fastened studs and seams. Moreover, the seams can rot on the side of the motor Brezkovic, and on the side of the motor shield and the upper support of the spar, like forgive. The reasons are banal: the filthy Zeistschweif, the stingy SMTA and the water at the overhead niche and the Wiedsutnesti site. Signs are given and not more precisely stamping, and internal stresses of the panels, which are blamed for the reasons, as well as inaccurate provisions of the seam sealant. If you leave behind the specific design and even the low wear resistance of the Karma and the seat, then the salon is even more disgraceful. There is a lot of cheap plastic here, but there is a lot of space and a special style. Porvnayani naftizi cheap vrpes kami automobile vntarar nuvatai, LN fanti budgetary Renault nafti Japanese Korates Viosablivi claims not vinag. It is unlikely that the stench will be chiming to the point that a lot of buttons do not light up. It is important that they do not work with this sound. Otherwise, in budget configurations, there is a water-sitting elevator. Then, the panel of accessories was fun here, sitting handily, holding a cup of food and receiving Kermo. It's hard to drive in such a salon. Just don't mitigate the hose and don't polish it with an emery paper, you'll keep a normal look for a long time. Electricity in the car is even simpler, and it's smarter plus. The axis only yakst Vicon Anya Pitvela. The wiring of the motor VDS coupe pass at the right wheel arch over the locker and gnaw out in the CY zone successfully. In front of the wheel, at the same wheel niche, the relay block of the fan relay in the cooling system was installed, and the wind was not alive for a long time. The block of the relay of Poisonia Z wiring on the headlights. At the underhood wires, the wires are roaring for an hour, the shards of the wires and the insulation are already average. Well, obviously, darts are breaking in the corrugations of the doors, especially the water and the rear ones. Wiring for an hour to lead in the most important places. You can use non-sealing roses on the box or roses of salon mowing, nasty wrapping at the factory. Well, obviously, you don't put butter in roses. More from the wider layman, you can see the lightning of the accessory panel. Switching the emergency button does not work for everyone. The same buttons are often activated. The block of the central lock here is Ochromie and Inid Teslamajia. What is unacceptable? The wiring of that block relay is found in important lancers, so the car may not start periodically through their windows. The problems are simple in a nutshell. A person will be more likely to figure out how to become a great tester. Golovna, the car did not burn out after a short flicker. Mustache engines work on the 90-second gasoline. They often blame EGR problems. If a flame was detected on the valve cover in the area of the drainage tube, it means that the crankcase ventilation system is clogged. The mechanical boxes are overblown. Truth be told, there were fluctuations in the way out of the fret of the bearings of the primary shaft. But on the machines of the Young for 2009, the problem has become irrelevant. A bunch of people who like to fly often found scargs on the variator, which, when dispersed, wore a belt through a Swede. The design was gradually completed, and the variator stopped laminating. Front suspension with McPherson struts. Periodicity of replacement of elements to deposit is a cost of spare parts. It is not necessary to sound frequent Tricania in it, if you want to ask to replace the struts, stabilizer bushings and culvert supports. At the rear axle, once every 60,000 kilometers, ask for an update of the strut, and 3 or more stabilizer bushings. Shock absorbers fit removed in 100,000 kilometers. And silent blocks are important to wear, sound, after 130,000 kilometers. Often go through a weak body, but they get stuck in the borders of the tolerance of the breakup of wheels.